to make a difference by 2020.
Well, let's take a look at those figures then. Of the 96 names on the list, 62 are male, while just 34 are female.
The average man on the list paid £295,000.
While the average woman earns £210,000. Let's bring in Patrick Woodman, Head of Research for the Chartered Management Institute, who joins me now from our Westminster studio. Patrick, were you surprised when you saw these figures or not, given your research and how reflective they are of the nation as a whole?
No, the figures aren't a big surprise because they, to a surprising extent, reflect the reality in the wider economy. What our data shows from the National Management Salary Survey is that at the top of organisations, women make up around 32% of director roles. So there's an incredible parallel with what we've seen today from the BBC. This is an issue that affects employers in every sector. And it's great, I think, that we've got transparency about the issue and can move the discussion forward now.
Why it is important to have equality in high-up roles? Is it not that just men are more capable?
Well, actually, the research shows that more diverse teams deliver better results. There's very clear research evidence on that in terms of the benefits to stakeholders and shareholders. It's about understanding your customer better, and it's about having different viewpoints in the room. And I think not only is that important for television and broadcasting, it's a must for any business to thrive today.
But why, so many years after the Equal Pay Act, does this still go on?
I think that's one of the things that we are understanding much better now, which is that this isn't just about equal pay for equal work. It's completely intertwined with the question of progression through management roles. So the fact that we have got so few women making it to the upper echelons of organisations is very much interlinked with the average pay gap. So employers really need to look at all the factors that are holding women back, perhaps making them prone to leave organisations, not returning from maternity, feeling that they can't combine home life and work life. And getting those things right actually is the benefit of men as well as of women.
There is, though, the argument as well that you just can't measure talent, can you? It's, you go back to end of the peer shows. What people earn for essentially performing is a very subjective thing, and some people will command greater salaries than others.
Well, I think clearly television is a very highly contested area. There are a lot of broadcasters, and the BBC today have been at pains to say that they're not only competing with traditional broadcasters, but with new media as well. And clearly any business is going to have to work with market forces. But at the same time, I think we need to recognise that, as with business, we have cultures and ways of doing things which have tended to see men rise to the top much more readily. That's been reinforced by old school networks, the old school tie, the old boys club. Call it what you will, things haven't been set up in a way that have necessarily given women those equal opportunities. Businesses increasingly realise that and are working hard to fix it.
Wage transparency, I mean, obviously we're getting a level of that at the BBC for these very high earners. But do you think wage transparency is something that we should be seeing much wider across all industries, or is that never really going to happen?
I think it's an incredibly powerful lever for achieving change. We live in an era of transparency, and actually for employers, both private sector and public sector, we have seen the introduction of regulations this year by the government which require large employers to publish their average gender pay gap. About 30 big employers have done that so far. We think that's incredibly welcome, and those 30 who have gone first are to be encouraged. And it's got to be linked to setting very clear targets. Take the BBC today. Lord Hall has committed the BBC to closing that gap by 2020. Transparency about where you are now as an organisation, about where you want to get to and how you're going to get there is really powerful, because it means that customers and stakeholders, as well as your employees, can hold you to account.
I mean, in terms of achieving that by 2020, if you have two people doing the same job and then they've now been made aware that they aren't being paid the same, why does it take till 2020 to fix it?
I think for an organisation as large as the BBC or any big organisation, there will be questions about the progression of people through different levels of the organisation. One of the most important things we need to remember, and when it comes to business, we've talked a lot about the presence or lack of women in the boardroom. Actually, you can't only have that conversation in isolation. You've got to look at the management pipeline and whether women are progressing through the talent pipeline in equal numbers. The same could be said, actually, for other aspects of diversity, like racial and ethnic diversity, where research that CMI has published today with the British Academy of Management shows that we've got even further to go than on gender.
OK, Patrick Woodman from the Chartered Management Institute, thanks very much.
Thank you. Jeremy